Also, I'm curious if other people have background themselves in donor prospect research, or if you're development directors or so. Give me some of that background information too, so I've got some information on, a little bit of information on you. I work in Napa, California, and I have clients in Napa, but I also have clients all over the United States, some of whom I've actually never even met in person, which is kind of interesting. So I'm talking today about donor prospect research. Whoops, there we go. And of course it's all part of philanthropy, and philanthropy is one of those things that we all sort of skirt around it. Nobody really wants to talk about the wheres and hows of how you ask people for money. And the art of fundraising is in knowing what you want to do before you go in. And the reason, and this is also applicable to donor prospect research, because oftentimes when you go down the road to doing research on somebody, if you don't have your goal in mind, what you want from that research, you may have failure as well. The same thing true in fundraising. You've got to set your goal in order to have your success. Getting all that. There we go. Have a little trouble advancing the slide. Oh, come on. There we go. There we go. There we go. And why do people give? You may know this already. I'll just go over it. People give to people. They give to causes with whom they have a connection. And it's really a two-way street. So it's not just who you give to, but you want to know that when you've made that donation to somebody, that they care that they receive the donation from you. I know this is really important because I know for myself when I've gotten a phone call or just a thank you with a personal note written on it, how important it is to have that from people. And so finding those philanthropic donors, finding those donations, there's a lot of competition to get that money. And research, donor prospect research, advancement research, whatever name you want to give to it, is how you identify and find the potential donors for the development. And the researchers are really the ones that work with the frontline fundraisers to realize the fundraising goals for the nonprofit. So what are some of the first steps in research so you don't go get detoured? And know where you want to go in the beginning. Have a clear goal in mind. What exactly are you going to want to get from this research? Avoid any tempting sidetracks. Let's say you're doing a research profile on somebody and you find out that some little tidbit of information about them, but maybe it doesn't have anything to do with the fundraising goals. The development director has said, I want to know such and such about this person. I really just need to know an idea of their philanthropic giving in their assets, and you find interesting things about the house they just built or their hobbies. Don't get sidetracked in reading about and detailing that information. So you need to know now you need to know what you need to know now in order to advance the fundraising at this stage. So just have your goals clear in your mind. And what are you going to be able to find out about this person? Well, it's also important to know that you can only find out so much about any potential donor. There's a lot of information that's going to be hidden from you because it's not all publicly available information, and also because your ethics that are really guiding you as you do your research tell you that you can't look at that information. And also, you have to realize that if somebody has financial assets, they may be privately held, they may be something that is in there just between them and their financial advisor, and you're never going to know that kind of information. So that leads us right into the subject of ethics. While I am an advancement researcher or donor prospect researcher that is a member of the National Association of Researchers, as well as my state association, and I have maintained my membership ever since I started doing prospect research, which was back in about, it's hard to believe, but I think it was 1998. I've been doing research since then. And I've been a member of the state and national association since then because I want to be guided by their ethics. And their ethics state that it's very important to respect the individual, that's the person you're doing the research on, to respect their fundamental right to privacy and follow any and all applicable national, state, and local laws, as well as any internal policies that your nonprofit may have that talk about the collection and use of that information. And one thing to think about as well is that as you prepare the research profile on the individual, who gets to see that information within your organization? If you're going to be sharing it with people in the organization, is it just the people in the development? Are you going to be showing it to are you going to be showing it to people that are on the board? And if so, are you going to let them walk off with a copy of your research profile? So those are some of the things you need to think about. And then the research and your information is only information that's appropriate to the fundraising process, and you've got to protect the confidentiality of that. That also brings us right into social media, and as such, the organizations, the national organization, APRA, has had to come up with a whole set of ethics about how do you treat social media. The Facebook, the Twitter, the LinkedIn, Pinterest, all of that. So some of them are the same to make sure you have transparency and respect, that you maintain your highest professional standards. But then you get into what about the sharing, posting, disclosing of private or confidential information? What happens if you're researching somebody and you know that one of your board members is a friend of yours or somehow connected with you on Facebook? You've got to think about how you're using that information and posting information or looking at information. Again, you've got to make sure you're following all the laws and that you've talked about it internally at your organization and that you've got policies in place. You've got the highest standards of professional communication. And also, no friending. Let's say you're doing research on somebody, and the only way to get more information is to friend them. I'm hearing that some people are having a little problem with the audio. I'm going to try switching something. Let me just see if this gets better. Is that better? I decided to just hang up and call in. I'm hoping that this is better sound quality. Yes, I am speaking now. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I decided to just try a different audio connection to see if we get better audio that way. So let us know if that sounds better and that's more clear. So no friending with prospects or donors in the conduct of the research. So that means, let's say, and of course LinkedIn comes into play there, because if you go into LinkedIn and you sign in as yourself, people are going to know that you have been looking at their profile. So that's something to consider. Or maybe the only way to find out more information about somebody is to friend them on Facebook so that you could see their information. So that's really what that's talking about. You've got to be really careful about how you use the social media to get information about people. For the most part, I've stayed away from it. I don't like to use it. I think I can find enough information about a person without having to go to social media, but I can see how it would be helpful, particularly if you're looking at hobbies or interests, or in LinkedIn, very helpful for getting background about what business somebody is with. And then also consider the impact of your postings. What's going to happen to the organization or information? Let's say if you post anything, be very careful about how that may impact your organization or the individual. And I'm very careful about that because I know I'm connected on Facebook with a lot of people in the Napa Valley, so I'm very careful. For instance, I usually don't post anything whatsoever political. So what is prospect research? Well, prospect research is, and there's a very famous prospect researcher, Cecilia Hogan, and she says that prospect research is identifying, analyzing, and it recommends the avenues of support to get to your fundraising goals, to achieve the fundraising goals of the organization. Where's that next philanthropic donation, and how do you know you're headed in the right direction to get that donation? And as a point of resource, her book is terrific. It's available through Amazon. It's called Prospect Research, A Primer for Growing Nonprofits. She's got 2 editions, and I've got both editions, the earlier one and then the second edition. So prospect research really concentrates looking at that top tier of donors, not your annual donors, pretty much not somebody who comes to your event unless they show a lot of capacity, but that top 10% of people who give to your organization. So that's where you're concentrating your research. And the goal of research is to help meet your fundraising goals, to assist the frontline fundraisers in finding opportunities for financial support, to find some kind of wealth indicators to have an idea of how much the person might be capable of giving, and ideally what might be an idea of how much they would give to your organization. And then you've got to analyze that research information and work with the frontline fundraisers, whether they're gift officers, your development director, executive director. Sometimes organizations don't have development directors, and figure out what your next steps are going to be. So research identifies, qualifies, and defines your major gift donors. It looks for those connections between your trustees and your volunteers, and by volunteers I mean people that are friends of your board, people that maybe are on some of your committees if you have finance committees. Look at connections with other donors. Maybe your staff has connections. And research information helps guide the strategy that's going to be used for the cultivation and solicitation of people to become donors to your organization. prospect research is not, and a lot of times I have been asked this by people requesting research, what is the exact net worth of somebody? Because we see on Forbes and other sites that they publicize the net worth of somebody, and chances are you as a researcher are really never going to know the exact net worth of somebody. That's a mouthful. But anyway, you're not going to know because there's no way you're going to know the ins and outs of their personal financial details. You're not going to have an idea of all their assets. You're not going to be able to detail every piece of information about a prospect, and chances are you're not going to want to do that because you've got to stay on track. Remember what your goal is. And research is never a replacement for a visit. That's kind of the best research of all. When somebody from development goes and meets with the prospect, boy, that's your golden opportunity to find out information about somebody. The visit is what gives you if you're preparing to go to a visit or to have somebody go to a visit, the kind of research you might give to that development officer on their way would be some brief background on who the person is. I recently had a request from somebody. They said, oh, somebody's coming in the office today. Can you give us a detailed profile? And I couldn't give them a detailed profile right away, so I just gave them a real brief background information on who the person was and asked them to report back to me after the visit to let me know any information that they had gotten. It's also important to prioritize your prospect pool to know who are your most likely prospects, who are the ones who might geographically be closer to you, and also to plan those visits and sort of plan your timing around who you're going to be doing the research for. So you don't want to do research on somebody that, oh, maybe it's not likely that anybody's going to have time to see them for the next couple of months. But you'd be surprised. You still get requests for research if you're not prioritizing them and going, no, we weren't going to talk about that person at this time. And then if you have somebody who goes on a visit and they come back, be sure to take an opportunity to sit with them and go over what they found out at that visit and figure out who stays in the prospect pool, and begin to assemble your detailed research information and determine your cultivation strategy with the fundraising officers. And I always like to do this when I worked in an office and when I've worked for some fundraising consultants to help them to determine and define their cultivation strategy based upon the research that we found before the visit and after the visit, and also to help them figure out what the specific ask amount is going to be. And that's going to be perhaps a combination of looking at the person's giving to other organizations, their political giving, their giving to organizations similar as yours, and what comfort level they have in terms of amounts, and what people in their peer group are also giving to your organization. So the research that the development people can do when they're on site or with someone that is a prospect is listen and look for wealth and interest indicators and ask questions. Look at the real estate, their homes, any vehicles that they may have, hobbies, collections. Do they collect wood bowls? Do they have animals? Do they have cars? And discuss any employment and business affiliations, memberships, travel, recreation, just things that they do. And as I am also a database manager, I always like to say, remember to record those observations and put it in the database. Just remember to put it in the database, so it's not in somebody's file somewhere that you never, or on some piece of paper. Now, let's say the solicitation is imminent what kind of research are you going to do at that point in time? Well, you're probably going to want to fill in any research gaps, see if there's any kind of recent news that's come up on that person, review all your research, and see if there's anything in there that may affect the solicitation, any kind of clue that can help that person. Maybe the person has just made a donation, maybe an article has just been written about them, perhaps the sale of one of their companies is imminent. You can help the fundraiser with this information before they go on to make an ask. So when you're preparing a research profile, and if you are, I'm going to stop too and let you know that if you're interested in receiving a copy of a sample research profile, let me know, and I'll be glad to send that to anybody. Give me your email during the presentation, and I'll be happy to send you one. I've got a sample of a full profile, what I call a full profile, with all the information you'd be able to get on somebody, but it's all fake information. So if you'd like a copy of that, just let me know. So choose what format you're going to use when you start your profile. Are you just doing a board profile, somebody who's a prospective board member? Maybe you just need a paragraph. I had a client one time that was recruiting a lot of board people, and they really just wanted a short paragraph on who that person was. Less is really often more. Sometimes one page of valuable information is really a lot better for the gift officers or the development directors. If you've got something that's 10 pages long, it may be just too much for them to go through that, figure it out. They look at it, they see it's 10 pages, they go, oh my gosh, I'm never going to have time to read that. So you kind of have to figure out what's the best profile format for the situation and for the people with whom you're working as well. So let's say you're going to get started. You're ready to do that profile. Remember, review all the information you've already got. What have you got from any files, visits? What's in the database? What have the fundraisers said about that person? So take a look at that first and kind of have it in front of you. Remember what your goal is. Do they really just want the charitable giving and assets? Do they also need biographical and company information, ideas of where the person volunteers? Is the name spelled correctly? You'd be surprised how many times I've gotten something on a little itty-bitty piece of paper and with the name not spelled correctly. If it's a relatively common name, you're really going to have the middle name or the middle initial to help you identify and hone in on who that person really is. And look at your checklist of sites to use. So you've got that checklist of where you're going to be looking so you don't get easily distracted. Where are you going to look for that information? Well, I often sometimes I just start by typing in the person's name into my internet search, whether it's Google or Bing or whatever it is. Sometimes I just start putting in their name and finding their employer website. You can often get a great bio on who somebody is from their employer website, and then you've got all kinds of clues you may pick up there, who their employer is, where they went to school. Sometimes it mentions whether or not they're married, have kids. Then you also want to look for nonprofit donations. Have they attended any events? Can you find any clues of whether or not they've gone to any big fundraising events or small fundraising events in your area? Also, if you can find an obituary of any kind of family members, then you're going to see all the connections within their family, and that can be very helpful. I also find Google Images sometimes, even if I've searched using Google, using the person's name and all kinds of connections, I find sometimes if I just jump over to Google Images, put in their name again, I find things through the images that link me to sites and documents that I haven't found any other way. Most often, it's been things having to do with events, and that's been really helpful because then you get an idea of their giving and what they give to and who they might give with, and also you'll get a nice pictures. I almost always include a photograph of somebody on my profiles. Zava search, Wikipedia. Of course, you always have to be a little bit careful about those. So those are just some of the places you can look for the information. Now for addresses, phone numbers, real estate, you can look at website white pages. NOx is something that I subscribe to, so I have to pay a monthly fee or a one-time fee if I just need to look at something in particular. But that's generally where I go for my real estate. That's where I go to get an idea of what somebody owns in terms of real estate. It's an excellent resource. And then once I get an idea of what they own, then it'll give me a full printout on the size of the house, how many bedrooms, pool, square footage, lot size, when it was purchased, when it was sold, what the assessed value is, and then I always use Zillow for a comparable. So my profile might say that the 2013 assessed value of the house is $300,000, but then I'll jump out to Zillow and get a comparable. And you always want to make sure you have an idea of both, especially because real estate values and how they're assessed change so much from state to state around the United States. And then for looking on business information, Reference for Business, Yahoo Finance is a great resource, Biz Journals, Hoovers. Hoovers, again, is a fee site. You've got to pay to use Hoovers. Manta, that'll oftentimes give you just the bare bones on who the company officers are, where they're located, salary.com. Martindale Hubbell, if you're looking for information on somebody who's a lawyer. The American Medical Association. Find Law, again, if you're looking for information on a lawyer. Forbes. Generally, for somebody of very high net worth, you're going to find information on Forbes, but I find a lot between business journals and Forbes for Business Week as well. I find an awful lot of information on people. And stock information, well, you're really only going to be able to find out information on somebody who's an insider. So you're going to look at MarketWatch or SEC information to find the name of somebody who's an insider. And an insider is really somebody who just has 5% or more of the company's stock. And also charitable donations. You will find those are the two places. Again, NOSA is I pay for using NOSA. There are other places out there that have databases that assemble information on charitable donations. NOSA is the biggest. It was privately owned for many years, and then it was bought by Blackbaud. Blackbaud is the one that owns Razor's Edge. Of course, the Internet, you can always use the Internet. What you have to do, though, when you use the Internet is refine your searching so that you're just looking on either EDU or ORG sites. Look to see if they're an event chair. Look for any gift in kind. Did they donate auction lots? And then for political giving, Open Secrets is a good website, FEC. And this may give you an idea of somebody's giving levels. And I've often found that younger people will give political donations long before they start to give philanthropic donations. But you'll get an idea of what their comfort level is. Foundations, where do you look? GuideStar, Foundation Center, Foundation Search. Those are really the main places. And, of course, Foundation Center, Foundation Search are all fee. GuideStar, you can get a user profile without having to pay a fee, but it's you're rather limited. Also, start to see whether or not the person gives through a community foundation or through a donor-directed fund. And here are some of the professional resources. Now, the Association of Professional Researchers for Advancement, that's the national organization of researchers. There are a lot of information on their website. Prospect L, I've been subscribing to this listserv since 1998. It's a fantastic resource for conversation. I get it HTML digested every day. Questions, researchers asking each other, oh my gosh, I need help with researching this person in China. How do I do that? Also, fund services is a terrific one for everybody in development. Lots of questions. So I highly recommend fund services. And then here are some other resources. David Lamb, University of Southern California, Stanford University. These are all terrific. What they have, let me just see if I can jump out to David Lamb. Let's see if it'll do it for me. You can see what it does. All these websites have got places for you to search. See, here's the business, Hoover's, Manta, NOEX, private company valuation. These are all great resources that people have already put together where to look for this information. For if you're looking at real estate, Zillow, this is a tax assessor database, UVA, donors, political, here's NOSA, federal campaign. Oh, I see you can't, I have to share, oh dear. Okay, she said, I don't know how to share my, okay. I'll go back to the slides. There we go. So unfortunately, I don't know how to share my internet so that you could see what I was looking at. But if you click on any of these, you will go to websites that have all of the research sites already compiled for you so that you can see all of them digested in one place. And so let's say if you were going to search on me, you might go into, type my name into Google. You'd get my company website. You could go out to MarketWatch and see whether or not I'm an insider. You'd find out I wasn't. You'd find out where I live and probably an idea. Then you could take that information to NOEX and find out the value of my home. You can get the comparable on that. You can use NOSA to see whether or not I give to. Chances are I'm not going to be in there too much, so because I'm a smaller donor, but you'd be able to find out a bunch about me by just typing in my name and using the EDU and the ORG sites. And then one thing that's, I want to make sure I finish soon so we can get to your questions. How do you value somebody? How do you rate somebody? Well, the standard formula for researchers is you compile what is the value of all of their real estate assets. You multiply that times 5 to get an idea, an approximation of what their net worth is. And then you multiply that times 0.05 to get an idea of their gift capacity for all of their philanthropic giving over a 5-year period of time. And remember that that's different from the ask amount. So just to review, you want to put your research into a profile format, look at all of your research, review it with the frontline fundraisers, share your findings, perhaps work together to come out with what a target gift amount is going to be. Is this person really an annual fund donor, or are they truly a major gift donor? Maybe you found out they're probably a planned gift donor, and work together to find out what your actions and solicitation strategy is going to be. And then who's going to do the fundraising? And of course, just putting in a plug for the database. Remember to enter it in the database with all the coding and actions. Did somebody go on a visit? Did you make an ask? Well, make sure it all goes in the database, because the database is the institutional memory for the nonprofits. People come and go all the time. So if it's not in the database, it didn't happen. It's in somebody's drawer or file, and when they leave, it's hard to find it again. So just a few things to remember, that research is really a mixture of art and science, and it's a lot like detective work in a way, because you're really investigating and finding out more about somebody. Remember your goals, stay on track, be objective, and show respect for the prospect. Stick to the facts. Label your profiles as confidential. Figure out who you're going to share the profiles with, and you've got some guidelines in place in your organization. So as who you're going to share it with. I know a couple times what we would do is, if we shared the profiles with the board or with the development committee of volunteers, I'd number the profiles when I handed them out, and I'd collect them back up so that I made sure that nobody walked out the door with that profile that wasn't on staff. Because and I really feel this pretty strongly, and I feel that fundraising is about helping people do what's most important to them. And I have a strong affinity and affiliation with the nonprofits that I work for, and I feel strongly about really trying to help them. And with your donor prospect research, your fundraising goals will be achieved. I find that donor prospect research can be really important and integral part of helping with those fundraising goals be achieved. So Natalia, are there questions?
Thanks for all that information, Francis. I know it's been helpful for me, so I can only imagine it's helpful for other people too. So our first question is from someone named Nathan Londonek. I hope I'm pronouncing that properly. And he would like to know, how much time should I expect to be giving to researching the average bid prospect?
So how much time to be given to researching an average prospect? All right, well, I'm going to say that if you are putting together a background profile on somebody with perhaps a little bit of biographical information on them, a little bit about their company, their assets, and their charitable giving, probably 3 hours. That's a rough estimate. I rarely spend much less than an hour and a half. A full-blown profile on somebody that I've really got to get a lot of information, it could be as much as 5 or 6, but I would say most likely in the 1 to 3 hour range.
Okay. Moving on to our next question. What do I say to my boss when I give them a research piece that doesn't give enough financial information? Do you have some tips for how to educate them regarding what we should expect to find?
Oh, yes, because they want to see information that you might not be able to find on a person. Yes, I've certainly had that happen. Yeah, I think you probably have to educate them on the fact that a lot of that information is really going to be hidden from you, because you're really only able to, you're guided by the fact that you can really only see publicly available information, and your ethics tell you that you can't really go snooping maybe that's not the right word, but looking too deeply into somebody's information without violating the ethics of looking for that information. I know that a lot of times people have wanted me to get the net worth, and you just can't, or to say they've sold a private company. Well, you might be able to get an idea based on the sale of other private companies that are in the same business. You might be able to get an idea of how much that private company would sell for, but you're never going to know that information. And sometimes even when property is sold, people keep the sale price secret. So even if you go to the tax people, you're never going to find out. So I think it is hard, and it is a back and forth education with the fundraisers.
Our next, oh, sorry?
Go ahead.
Our next question asks, how proactive have you had to be to get major gift officers to give you the post-visit info that you need to keep refining a stronger prospect pool? Our major gift officers never give me information, and I'm always chasing them. Any ideas to help me get them to cooperate?
Oh boy, that sounds like exactly the same problems I always had. It is very difficult to get them to give you that information after their visits. I agree. I would sometimes I had to kind of make it into a joke, or not exactly a joke, but just a banter with the person to say, oh, I know you met with somebody recently. It's really going to help me to do the research if I have an idea of what happened when you went on with them. I've got to make sure that I've got it in the database and that we keep track of exactly what happened on the visit. So I do understand, and I had exactly the same problem, and it kind of makes me laugh because I can remember having the exact same issues. There were some people that were just a lot more reluctant than others to give out that information. I wish I had a magic answer to that question other than just really cultivating really good relationships with the fundraising officers and making sure that they see the importance of your role as the donor prospect researcher, and that you're really a team player, you're part of the team. You're part of who's going to help them achieve their success as a fundraiser. Was there another one, Natalia?
Yes, we have one last question. Do you try to conduct a regular check-in conversation with those people on the team who are soliciting so they stay organized? How do you approach keeping people on track?
Yes, I think that it is important to keep them on track. It's important to keep that prospect pool prioritized, and I think that the best way to keep people on track is to be sure to have either regular meetings where you review the prospect pool and who's on the prospect list at this time, what are any upcoming visits. Sometimes it works in a meeting where everybody sits down together. Sometimes it works by scheduling regular meetings with the gift officers. I know people always like to rely upon texting or emails or things like that, but I have found so frequently that one phone call or one meeting with somebody is worth a lot more than just a lot of emails. Just having that, checking in with that person, or maybe bringing in the names of the different prospects that you're working on or that are in the pool, and just helping them to stay on target. I think that is also one of the more difficult things. I think sometimes there's a lot of breakdown between the prospect researchers and the frontline fundraisers, and it's kind of the researcher ends up having to be the person that educates the other people on the importance of research.
Mm-hmm. Well, great. I think that's all the questions that we have for today, which is pretty good because we're running out of time. But I would just like to thank you again, Francis, for such a wonderful presentation, very informative. And for anyone that has maybe joined us late or would like to revisit any of the information, we will have a recording of this webinar up on our website, brimhallassociates.com. And also be sure to check out Francis at Anamosa-inc.com. And thanks again to everyone who's joined us. We will be having more free webinars, so keep an eye out for our emails.
And anybody who's interested, just email me directly, and I'm happy to answer individual questions, put you in contact with any of those websites I mentioned, perhaps put you in contact with other researchers, other associations, send you a sample profile. So just feel free to, should I put my email up in the chat window there?
Yeah, go for it.
Oops, let me just do it again. I did it just so everybody. Hold on. There we go. So I'm happy to help anybody. I know mentoring is important, and a lot of, also another thing to keep in mind is a lot of the state associations have a strong mentor programs.
That's true. So we are always available as free resources of information. I think that's all. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.